Partners, what George Smith Partners stands for as a firm, and where we intend to go. Welcome to The Landscape, the GSP FinFacts podcast. I'm Evan Kinney, and I'm here with my esteemed co-host, Mr. David Pascal.
Hello, good to see everyone.
Today we have two very exciting guests, the original two co-founders of George Smith Partners. I guess there were several others then, but we have two of them here with us today, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But we're very excited to have an episode about the legacy of George Smith Partners, what George Smith Partners stands for as a firm, and where we intend to go. So maybe we'll start down here.
I'll start. Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Bram. I'm one of the founders of the company. I've been here 39 years, and I was hired by...
Me. I'm Gary Tenzer. I was here from day one. I joined George before George Smith Partners at a prior company, and when that company was acquired, George started a new company and asked me to join him. And so if he was employee 0, I was employee 1. And I've been here ever since. It's now 43 years of my career.
That's great. So, David, you want to fire away with the first question here?
So, talk about maybe the 3 or 4 biggest changes to the business since the founding of GSP back in the days of portfolio lenders, etc.
I'll talk about first the box that we're in, and then you talk about the lending scope, the way it's changed.
Sure.
So the box of the way work is done is obvious things from 1979, 1984 and now. Computers really weren't being used as much then. Lenders, you had to call, you couldn't email them. Email didn't exist. The internet didn't exist really then. So business was done face to face or on the phone. You didn't have Zoom.
Well, let me add in, we had a print shop in the office to print books to send to lenders.
Right, that's right. So we did all of that. So the whole way business was done, everybody came into the office, nobody worked from home. So just the way of doing business, the scope of the number of lenders we worked with and how we presented information to them is totally different. The way we calculated the numbers by hand was different because we had to do it by hand. And Gary, why don't you mention about the lending playing field, how that's changed?
Well, there were lenders that exist, that classes of lenders that we worked with then that don't exist anymore. I think you might be able to find them in the Smithsonian. Savings and loans come to mind. Credit companies are another one that we did a lot of business with, like General Electric Credit, Westinghouse Credit,
Greyhound Credit,
Greyhound
Ford Credit,
yeah, McDonnell Douglas Credit.
Right.
Savings and loans, well, we know what happened to them. Thank you to the RTC. But there were other classes of financing that didn't exist, and out of the RTC came the CMBS lending and securitized lending. And that had not really did not exist before, and it was really created as a vehicle to finance deals that were coming out of SNLs.
And then I'd add that also debt funds, hedge funds and debt funds didn't exist. The whole ability of pools of capital to make loans through hedge funds and debt funds did not exist but for 10 or 15 years ago.
Really before the financial crisis.
That's right.
They really knew since then. So it's an industry that's constantly changing. It's one of the things that keeps it interesting. Obviously, real estate has changed. The type of properties have changed. There's industrial properties are considerably larger than they were then. Buildings are more sophisticated. Much more tailored to tenants than they were then. I think they were just really boxes that generated income before, and I think that the developers are thinking much more now about what suits the customer, the tenant.
And what kind of properties don't we do anymore? Indoor malls. Very rare to do those, right?
We don't do indoor malls. Office buildings are hard to do. A couple of years ago, they were what everybody wanted to do. So things change.
So tell us a little bit about how you did your work in the beginning. You mentioned it a little bit, but I know, Gary, that you were very instrumental in kind of pushing the company early on in a certain direction with technology. And obviously today, we have a massive technology focus. We've built out an entire operating system internally, et cetera. But
yeah. Well, I was a hobbyist in programmable calculators. That's how I got into this, into the computing area. And I studied computing when I was an undergrad at Berkeley, but I wasn't a major, I was an economics major. But I took a few programming classes, and I was interested in programming. And I went to a users group meeting one night of calculators, and somebody brought an Apple II computer in and showed me a demo of a program called VisiCalc. I had never seen anything like it before, and it changed my life. VisiCalc, unless you are over 60, you've never heard of it. VisiCalc was a predecessor to another program that really made the IBM PC what it was, which was Lotus 123. Actually, Lotus 123 made the Apple II what it was. VisiCalc was the predecessor to Lotus 123, and Lotus 123 begat Excel, and that's where we live today in Excel. So I came to George the next Monday. I walked into the office and said, George, I saw the future. I'm tired of doing all my calculations on green ledger paper, cross-footing and totaling down and making mistakes by hand. And I saw how to do this type of spreadsheet on a computer. We got to get one of these things. At the time, to outfit an Apple II computer with the memory we needed, a printer, and a screen was about, if I recall, about $5,000 or $6,000. Fortunately, his son had one that he wasn't using to play Space Invaders. Anyway, George brought it into the office, we set it up, and I got a demo copy of VisiCalc, and I was off and running, teaching myself how to do computer modeling. And that was the beginning. That was the first computer in the company. And then from there, we migrated from a couple of Apples, and we started getting IBM PCs and really sort of focused on eventually Windows and Excel and Word. But that's really what the genesis was. It started that we were doing some modeling using remote dial-up terminals on service bureaus. It was very cumbersome, difficult to do, and expensive. So we did it very, very rarely.
So you were asking where the business has gone. I think one of the things that makes our company special, the way it works, is that the senior guys have teams or go back to the shared services we have of younger guys, so that we can provide very detailed, extensive service to our clients. And that's either done by junior people on the team or junior people in shared services, whereas the way that we work, and we've always worked this way, is to give exquisite service to the sponsors. So as I always say, the sponsor can sleep at night because we don't. And what that means is that we're staying up at night concerned about all the details that need to be done for the client, so that the client doesn't have to be asking us, what's next, have you done everything? Rather, we're telling the client we're on top of everything. So that's one of the things that I think differentiates the way our company has always worked the whole time I've been here, providing that level of service.
I think that was one of the things that I learned from George, is that type of work ethic of staying in front of the client and doing making it easy for the client. I think there were other things too that were very important lessons. Clearly, his emphasis on ethics really stays with me. George passed away in 2005, and we continued the company on, fortunately, and very happy that we did. And we actually looked at each other and said, do we want to continue now? I mean, now that we don't have George, we don't really have a leader. Can we manage this ourselves, and do we want to move on? And we did. In 2005, the partners at the time said, let's move forward. But we carried forward with the ethos that George laid out for us, going back to the late 70s, early 80s. And I think we've carried that forward ever since.
So, go ahead, Vic.
Yeah, I'll take one here. So let's talk about how FinFax started, financing fax,
Well,
the beginning and what it is today.
I'll start. I think the concept was, how can we communicate with our customers who are out there? And we now call it FinFax, F-A-C-T-S, but initially it was called Financing Fax, F-A-X, facsimile. And that's because before computers and email existed, people had fax machines. Many of you out there may not have ever seen a fax machine, but before you had email, people would send documents by fax. So we would write up, and I have to hand it over to David Pascal, who for at least 20 years, and Gary Tenzer helped as well, that they've been preparing with George the financing fax document, which has always been one page, and we changed it to FinFax, F-A-C-T-S, when we no longer sent it out by fax, F-A-X. The idea has always been to keep the clients educated on the kind of financing we're seeing. So the FinFax has three parts of it. One part is to describe a deal or deals that we've recently closed, so clients can say, gee, that's interesting, maybe I have a deal like that you guys could help me with, or I never knew those kinds of deals are being done out there. That's a nice thing to learn. The second part is what's a lender that's got a new program that we share. Same reason, clients read it because they don't know what programs are out there. And the third thing is the economic forecast, and David Pascal writes that. David, maybe you can tell what's in that.
Well, it's something I started writing with George, and it was basically just some commentary on rates and lenders, and at the time we were really concentrated on what's going on in the CMBS market because it really changed lending. There was no newsletter talking about weekly CMBS updates, which kind of set market spreads. So we were known for that in the early days. And, as I learned how to write from George. And then after George passed away, I basically just, I tried to imitate George. And so that's what I'm doing now.
So to compliment David Pascal, he's been writing this economic forecast in the FinFax for the last 15 or 20 years. David is so good that often Bloomberg asks him to write things for them, and I bump into people in New York or LA in the financing business, and they all say, we read your FinFax every day, our FinFax every week. Our FinFax goes out to 70,000 people, get it every week.
And they're all double opt-in.
They're all double opt-in, which means we don't just spam
people. These are real subscribers.
People who want it.
Yeah.
And we bump into people that say, I read your FinFax every week when it comes because it tells me what's going on. It's short, it's sweet, and it's to the point.
And the interesting thing is, a major sector who reads our FinFax are lenders, because they're interested to know what their competition's doing, and they want to know it, and they're going to school on us. They call us all the time to ask us, maybe not what a specific lender is doing, but what's the market pricing a certain type of deal at, or how a deal is being structured in a certain way. So we become sort of the clearinghouse of information for a lot of lenders as well as for clients.
So I'd like to just shift gears a little bit onto what are the core values that have made George Smith Partners successful over the years. We've talked a little bit about this, Gary, and a little bit as a firm recently. But over the last, I've been here, 7 or 8 years, and I've heard a lot of quotes from George Smith that kind of reference things like trustworthiness and a true client service focus. Let's take a little bit of time to focus on those points and talk about things that you guys learned from George around those and how those are still relevant, if so, today.
Well, for instance, it became very apparent to me, well, it's easy math. You understand that we're compensated by a commission, and the larger the deal, the larger the commission. So the natural inclination would be to try and push dollars in a loan. And George never would do that. And I learned that from him. He always wanted to right size a loan for the client, to do what was best for the client, even though if he could squeeze another $20,000 commission out of it, he could have, but he didn't do that. His philosophy was, I want to have the client really happy because I want them to come back. I don't want to make the last nickel on this deal. I want to make it over a career of repeat relationship with a client. And I think that's a very important.
I want to add a point here, and that is that full disclosure to lenders, honesty to lenders, is one of the keys to our success, because a client hires us to represent them to pitch their deal to lenders. Lenders get dozens and dozens or more of submissions a day, and they want to make sure that the person that sends them the submission is someone they can trust. Not only do they want a package they can understand, but they want to make sure that it's truthful, honest and fully discloses everything that needs to be disclosed. And if we just did one wrong thing once, that lender's never going to forget about it and never going to trust our packages again. So every single time we send something out, it must be 100% full disclosure and truthful and honest. And that's what we do, because it's the right thing to do for business and because it's the right thing to do. And therefore we make extra clear that we're full disclosure on everything. It's good for business and it's good to be able to sleep at night for us.
And if we're making assumptions about things, we label them. We disclose what they are.
So while some people might put packages together that are all fluff and try to make it look like the deal's great when maybe it's not, the better approach is to always disclose the pimples on the deal up front, let the lenders know about it. And you know what, when you do that, a lender, if they don't already know you're an honest broker, they learn that you're an honest broker when you tell them the things that aren't so great about the deal, which we do. Every deal's got its issues.
And they stop looking for things that you haven't told them. Right? If you tell them everything's perfect, then they start worrying and they start looking, you know. And
so I just want to add to it. So cooperation and honesty at the firm then is something else that we do as well. Some firms, people lock their desks. They're afraid that other people at the firm are going to steal from them or look in their files or something like that. I think the opposite goes here. Everybody openly, freely shares the information they have from the top down. We make sure that there's complete trust between brokers and the people that run the firm. And if somebody doesn't follow that mantra of operating honestly amongst their peers in the office, they no longer work here. And over the years, a very, very small number of people have found this wasn't the best place for them.
That's great.
Good.
and we help them find that. Help them come to that conclusion.
So hey, while David's thinking here, I heard a great quote. I don't know if it's real, but it's an old George Smith quote, supposedly, and that is that if the shoe almost fits,
Wear it.
Okay, so what does that mean?
I have no idea. Never did it. No. But George wrote that as a headline in FinFax.
Yes.
And what was happening at the time is that we were in a market similar where we are now. That rates were moving up, and lenders are being very conservative. Mm-hmm. And he had experience of presenting, lender offers to borrowers, and borrowers saying, "Yeah, but it's not quite what I want. I want a little bit more. I want a little bit more." And push here, George. And he finally said to one, if the shoe almost fits, wear it. And what was happening is that you push the deal so far they break. And George understood that, and that was sort of his mantra that he was telling clients. That's where that came
the
from.
subtext of that, which I think would call like maybe the Bram corollary, is the sponsor wanted to know that they've pushed the market to the best execution, even if it's not what was in his mind as perfect, and go, look, we've pushed it, this is
Right.
the best deal out there.
So we're kind of in that market right now.
We
I know
are.
David and I are working on a deal where, during the course of the deal, interest rates have come up, 80 basis points.
Right, fixed rate.
Fixed rate, yeah. We've also seen during this last couple of months, leasing kind of slow a bit, and they haven't been able to drive rents in the way they had anticipated. And I think we've basically gone to the ends of the earth in terms of potential capital stacks, try to get very creative, with ground lease bifurcations, preferred equity, all kinds of different structures. And the bottom line is, at some point, if the shoe almost fits, wear it. In this market, it feels like to me, and I'd like to get your guys' wisdom on this, that we're going through a bit of a period of sort of capitulation from real estate owners, where they're starting to understand that interest rates are likely to be long for quite some time. David and I were discussing this earlier. And if so, what's the implications for them and their financing? You guys have been doing this for 40 years. What's your outlook with respect to borrower sponsor expectations? And,
Well, I think it varies. Everybody's different, obviously.
Right.
Every one of our borrowers is different, and they have different levels of how they see reality, how they see their view of reality. I don't mean that they're not in touch with reality, but different people have different perspectives. Some people think rates have peaked right now. Some people think that there's more to go, and that's guiding decisions. But my sense is, and I agree with you, that there is a sense that, okay, we're in the real estate business, we have to transact. Sometimes you really have to transact because you have a maturity coming due.
Sure.
And you have to do something. You can't just wait. People are not refinancing to pull cash out of deals because that usually is not accretive with interest rates being higher than when the original loan was put in place. So, but there are reasons to transact. There's opportunities to acquire properties that maybe, or acquire notes. There's some things that are now beginning to surface at this stage of the cycle, and I think people are being opportunistic and looking for those opportunities. Those
Right, distressed properties,
yes,
bank owned, possibly.
perhaps. Doesn't seem to be a flood of it yet.
No, but it might be happening soon.
Cool. Well, I think it's about time to wrap up. Is there any parting thoughts or words of wisdom out there?
Well, let me tell you what I'm going to do over the next 40 years. No.
Now, we're really glad to have both of you guys.
Well, let me just say something, because I do want to say something, that obviously we made a major change last year, and
Right.
that is by Access Capital acquiring the company, and that is a change. It was a change in management style, which was really a management committee, and it's more top down now. Evan, you're now CEO, and which is great. But I think that a lot of the characteristics that we've had have carried forward. There have been things that have been added to it by virtue of the tech group, which you alluded to earlier, that are doing a tremendous job in producing proprietary software for us to use to monitor our transactions, to get them into the marketplace, and to track them through the marketplace, and to help us source and figure out what are the best capital sources for particular deals with the highest probability of closing. And that's a major change that has not happened until the acquisition. So I'm really excited about those changes and looking forward to seeing where that takes us.
I agree.
Great. So you can find us at gspartners.com, and also the Landscape podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
And YouTube, yes.
And David, where do they find out about FinFacts if they're not a subscriber?
They go on our website and subscribe.
gspartners.com.
Yeah.
That's right.
There you go.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.